What's up guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're doing what if Deku had the powers of soul leveling, also known as Sun Jinwoo's powers, in My Hero Academia Part 2. So where we last left off, Deku had just finished his class assessment test and had gained the class Shadow Monarch, which is a rank up of his previous class, known as Necromancer. Deku had also gained 21 Knights, 3 Wizards, and 1 Red Knight, which we know as Icarus and who will be referred to as Icarus for the rest of the series. Deku kept training afterwards and learned skills like Stealth and Vital Strike, and before he went to the UAA entrance exam. During the written test for the exam, Deku didn't score nearly as high as he did. He scored a little bit below her, mainly because to understand his new power that he got 2 months, he had to study more for it. As well as afterwards, the written test, when President Mike was explaining about the practical exam, Ida did his whole stand-up thing and everything, which President Mike just explained that the zero-pointer was more of an obstacle rather than actually being something that you would have to have physically fought. So afterwards, Ida, with an upset look, sat down and understood what President Mike was talking about. Afterwards, during the actual practical exam for herself, as soon as the gates opened, Deku didn't run out. Everyone else had ran out, and afterwards Deku raised all of his shadow soldiers and split up into 3 groups: Group A, Group B, and Group C, each containing 7 knights and 1 wizard each, while Icarus stayed with him. He sent them to scour across the city to help out anyone in need, and to take them to the recovery station in case they're injured, as well as to just destroy robots. Deku and Icarus were doing the same thing. Then out of nowhere, they start to hear trembling. They look to see a zero-pointer. Deku instinctively thinks, saying, I can't fight that. That's not going to work very well, and starts to run away. But then he hears a girl scream. He turns around to see a brunette-haired girl trapped under a boulder. He sends Icarus to go help the brunette-haired girl, while he runs to try to hold off the robot for as long as he can. Deku dodges the robot's punches, as well as he Vital Strikes, which is a technique that increases his physical attacks, on one of the tank treads that the giant zero-point robot rode on, causing that tank tread to break, making it so the robot can no longer go forward, can only move left and right. Afterwards, Deku did the same thing to the other tank tread, leaving the robot immovable. But as soon as he just finished making the robot immovable, the timer sounds off, and Deku starts to walk back out. Deku kept training, understanding his powers more, learned how to use his abilities for being a Shadow Monarch so he can switch places with his shadows, and also learn that he can place shadows in other people's shadows rather than just being in his own. After that had occurred, Deku decided to head out for a bit. While he was walking, he took a key that he had gotten from one of his daily missions, and it was a rank B key. Deku took the key and he twirled it around in his hand, thinking that he probably shouldn't do this because he was expecting a mail anytime soon. So he put the key back into his inventory. Afterwards, Deku walked back to his house just to see his mom freaking out and handing him a letter about the UA entrance exam. Deku had read the letter, and the letter said that he didn't read the letter. A hologram disc popped out, and All Might was on it, telling him that he had got in and that he was welcomed and that he scored first place by far, massively beating everyone else out of the running by like 300, 400 points. So it was an insanely high number. After that had occurred, Deku, getting his UA uniform on, prepared for the next day. Deku, early in the morning, walked to the UA classes. He decided to wake up earlier than usual in canon to finish his daily quest before heading there, so he had his stamina potions. But this time he decided to do it 3 times as long, and he got to choose a reward, a first-time reward for completing this bonus quest, which gave him either a cursed box or a gold box. He decided to select the cursed box. Afterwards, he gained a key, and I can't remember what the key was called, but it was like to whatever gate. I think it's Hell's Gate, which Deku sets aside for now, thinking that he'll probably challenge that after he challenges the unnamed B rank dungeon. So he walks into school, and he walks into room 1A. He sees the incident with Bakugo and Ida, and Bakugo scoffs at seeing Deku, wondering how this shitty nerd without a quirk made it into the school. Ida sees Deku and he runs over and starts doing his whole Ida thing, having his hand out and everything and saying, "You must be an excellent, more superior student than me. You must have solved the second criteria for the entrance exam to rescue people and help them." And Deku more or less brushes this off and says, "Well, it wasn't like I knew. I just assumed, it's kind of a hero's job to save people, not just to destroy villains. If you were a hero, you would have understood that." And Ida instantaneously thinks about this for a second, and he's thinking that Deku was a little bit rude on his approach, but he did have a point, If I was thinking like a hero, I would have attempted to save the other person now taking the test, rather than only thinking about gaining points. Out of nowhere, a girl tapped him on his shoulder, and he turned around, and he saw Uraraka standing behind him. He saw the brown hair brunette girl with a bowl cut standing behind him. And she's like, "I know that green hair anywhere. You're the guy who sent the fiend that you have after to save me." And Bakugo's listening to this, and he's intrigued, but he's not showing any relevance in listening. And Izuku's like, "Oh, you mean Icarus?" And he's like, "Yes, Icarus is one of my allies, I guess you can say, that I have grown very well known with." Because he's known Icarus for about 5 months now. And even though, yes, Icarus does not talk, he still knows him. And Uraraka is asking, "Is that your quirk?" And Deku says, "Yes, I guess you can assume that is my quirk, in essence. Even though we know it's not a quirk, it's a totally different thing. Under the base assumptions, people would assume that is his quirk." Out of nowhere, a weird yellow blob flops in through the door, just to stand up to see that there's a person inside the yellow thing. He then zips himself outside of it and tells them, "Get on your gym uniforms. We're gonna go take a quirk assessment test." And Ida is confused by this, going, "What do you mean? We already did that, and we have an entrance ceremony to get to. If you want to spend your time going to entrance ceremonies, then go ahead, waste your time. But real heroes don't have time to waste like that." So everyone just looks at each other and assumes that he's the teacher and gets on their uniforms to go to the entrance ceremony. I mean, not the entrance ceremony, to go to the area out back to do the quirk assessment test. Aizawa doesn't give the speech about how one of you all are going to get expelled, because I really just didn't see a purpose of that speech. And he gives the ball to Izuku Midoriya, and he's like, "Izuku Midoriya, yes? What's your hardest throwing speed in middle school?" without using your quirk. And Deku just thinks for a second. He's like, well, it was 30. I'm pretty sure 30 was his cannon throwing range. And he's like, well, now throw that ball while using your quirk. And Bakugo talks up and says, he doesn't have a quirk. That shitty Deku doesn't have one. And Aizawa kind of thinks weirdly while looking at Bakugo. And he goes, but Izuku does have a quirk. I saw him while we were viewing the test. And Bakugo's kind of set back by this, because he did hear the brunette-haired girl talking about a black fiend that Izuku summoned, but he still didn't completely understand. And Izuku's jacked in this series, man, mind you. He's taller and a lot more buff. So Bakugo instantaneously noticed that he was buffer and stuff. So Izuku thinks for a second, and he also chimes into Aizawa, telling Aizawa that, no, I do not have a quirk. My ability is not a quirk. Which Aizawa gets caught off guard by this and just stands there and is like, throw it. Which Izuku does. He takes the ball and he throws it. And all the way over down there before the ball land, there was a second personnel, a black looking with a slight reddish aura to him, who hit the ball with his broadsword. And the second person was Icarus. Icarus ran down there really quick and hit the ball with his broadsword like a bat, just batting the ball away, sending it flying, which reached about 1,200 meters. And Aizawa's kind of shocked because he's realizing that this kid does not have a quirk, because when I activated my quirk to stop it, it didn't work. What is this kid's powers? If it's not a quirk, what is it then? And everyone else is kind of impressed by this, and everyone else does their throws and stuff. And it goes Uraraka, Deku, Bakugo, and then Todoroki. Uraraka got Infinity. But basically, Deku wins in everything else except for the speed race, which he's just 1.0001 second behind Ida on. No, wait, not second. My bad. 0.001 milliseconds behind Ida. After all of that, Aizawa was just impressed. This kid does not have a quirk, yet his physical capabilities and this weird shadow capabilities he has allows him to do it. It's amazing. As time goes on, more and more people start to notice that, but not too many of the other kids think in the class. They all just think that Deku's just calling his quirk not a quirk. But some people are noticing that Deku is surprisingly really strong, really fast, and has some sort of shadow manipulation powers, is what they think, because they don't know it's actually the resurrected dead of his enemies. Yeah, that's fun. So afterwards, the event had ended, and Deku was walking home. He was walking home solo when Bakugo yelled, "Shitty Deku! What the f*** was that power? How the hell were you able to throw a ball farther than me when you're quirkless?" And Izuku looks at Bakugo and he's like, well, you see, my power is known as solo leveling. And Bakugo is just kind of taken aback by this. And Deku explains his power to him, and he also explains that Bakugo shouldn't have murdering or killing intent around Deku, because sometimes the system that gives Deku his powers will tell him to murder all personnel that have a murderous intent towards him, if they're humans. It doesn't really matter if they're any other species, but if they're humans, that he has to kill them. And Bakugo is kind of confused. He's like, what do you mean by other species? And Deku explains that while reaching into his inventory, he grabs out the unnamed key, the B rank key, and says that, well, the system gives me these keys, and these keys allow me to go to different worlds, or what I assume to be different worlds, with different species of creatures. When I first did my class ascension, which is what gave me my shadow capabilities, I had to go into like a castle and defeat knights and mages and stuff. Hence the reason why all of my things I have now are knights and mages. And Bakugo is pretty smart, so he puts it together. He's like, "What are you, some sort of necromancer?" And Deku shakes his head. And Bakugo is even more taken aback by this, because not only is Deku explained that he has some weird power that isn't a quirk, he's also explained that this power made him a necromancer too. And he's like, "So every single shadow creature you summon is one of your defeated enemies that you murdered?" And Deku's like, "Yeah, in essence." And Deku's like, "So when you're ready, I'll give you this B rank key and you can go fight a B rank dungeon." So I'm going to state other people can enter the dungeon itself, because in the most recent manga development, it tells us that the shadow teleportation technique is more of like a gate that he opens up, and he opens up a gate on the other side too and travels that way. So I'm going to assume that these keys open up a gate that you can travel through. And if you travel through while touching the main personnel who opened up the gate with the key, they can travel through it as well, because that's base assumptions. A week passed and everyone's more settled into their school life when out of nowhere a man busts through the door and he's like, "Entering the door like a normal human." And half the class instantaneously recognizes this face as All Might. All Might, the number one hero? Oh yeah, All Might is teaching here. I can't believe we're gonna get taught by All Might. And All Might quiets down the class and he sees Izuku Midoriya, which he kind of remembered the look of from the Sludge Villain incident, but he more remembers the look of Izuku Midoriya from the practical exam, when he basically made the 0-point robot immovable as well as his shadow creatures that he summoned. And he says, "Today we are going to be holding a heroes versus villains test in Beta Block B." And everyone goes down to Beta Block B. I'm pretty sure it's Beta Block or Beta City B. And they all go down there. And basically, they all get split up into the same teams. And the first match that's going to happen is going to be the same. It's going to be Bakugo and Ida versus Uraraka and Deku. So as soon as before the match starts, Deku tells Uraraka, he tells her to stay back. He's going to place one of my creatures inside your shadow. And this will protect you in case of Bakugo and Ida ever pop up. And I'm going to send my creatures inside the building to kind of check the entire building. Most likely the bomb's on the top floor, so we really don't have to check for much. As well as I'm going to make it so as soon as they find them, they'll hide in the shadows. So I can shadow warp, which you can only do once every 3 hours, by the way, and quickly capture and detain them. And Uraraka goes, "Okay," and she asks, "What am I meant to do?" And Deku's like, "I want you to touch me and chuck me up on top of the roof. And then put your fingers together to release me. That's what I want you to do." And Uraraka is just okay with this. So Deku sends Icarus into her shadow, which is the Red Knight boss dude he fought during the exams. And Uraraka touches him and chucks him up in the air. And he gracefully lands on top of the building as soon as the match started. He sends his wave of he has 21 soldiers and 3 wizards on him. He sends all 24 of his soldiers, his shadow soldiers, into the building to search. And one of his wizards finds Ida, because Bakugo's already trying to rush down the floors while Ida stayed back. So Deku quickly swaps with the shadow wizard using his shadow exchange technique, and the shadow wizard start going back down throughout the building trying to find Bakugo and help take out Bakugo. And Deku quickly detains Ida and then touches the bomb. Afterwards, All Might declares that the heroes have won. And basically all the other fights played out the same. Bakugo's pretty pissed because he knows Deku had just done some magic stuff to basically instantaneously ensure his win. And All Might's even more impressed by this because he sees that this boy can even swap places with his shadows. quickly and easily, being able to take enemies off guard. Not to mention he can also hide his shadow into other people's shadow, his creatures in other people's shadows, as you saw when he did it with Urarakas. After that, all the other matches go out the same. And then, as the days go on, about 2 weeks after the Heroes vs. Villains test, Aizawa walks in and announces that they're going to the USJ. And everyone thinks the University Studio of Japan, that's amazing. And Aizawa says, no, it's the Unforeseen Situation Junction. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. The Unforeseen Situation Junction. And everyone's not too impressed, but Deku's still pretty hyped because he heard about this thing being built when it was back on being built, but it was more of a secret under wraps project at that time. So Deku was pretty hyped for it. After that had happened, they all got on the bus, and they were all explaining their quirks. And when I got to Deku, Froppy was like, Deku, what's your quirk? Froppy or Sue, whatever you call her. And then Deku explains, well, I don't have a quirk. And Aizawa was listening in from the front seat. And he explains, my power is called soul leveling. It's not a quirk, it's something totally different. In essence, what it is that it lets me act like a video game character. And my shadow creatures, like Icarus, and my other shadow soldiers that I have, they come from my class, which my class is Shadow Monarch. And people look at him funny because they have no clue what Shadow Monarch is. And he says, think of it as like the upgraded form of Necromancer. And Aizawa stops the bus. He pulls over and stops the bus. Instantaneously gives Izuku a very, very alarming look and asks Izuku to explain. So Izuku starts explaining. He starts stating that basically I get keys, and he pulls a key out from his inventory. It's just the unnamed B rank key again. That will become important in a future event, but isn't really important now. And he explains, when I take these keys to a certain area, I can open a portal to a different dimension. And basically, they're like monsters that spawn in like a video game dungeon. After killing the monsters, I have a choice to resurrect them. All the knights and wizards I have were monsters that I had resurrected and added to my legion afterwards, who had tried to kill me. Also, if anyone gives me murderous intent, I have to kill them. Or, so far that I know of, I would have to kill them. If not, my heart will stop. But I'm pretty sure I can control that later on if I keep practicing. And Aizawa was just taking this all in as he starts the bus and starts going, and no one knows even what to say at this point. They found out that Deku has killed and is using the dead souls of previous combatants that he has fought, even though, yes, they are monsters. They're not living humans. You know, it's like hunting a deer compared to everything else, that they're still in shock by it. So they get to the USJ and they meet 13 there. I was about to call her 16. They meet 13 there, and 13 explains what the USJ is when Deku sees a purplish black portal opening up in the center. And Deku instantaneously says, there's a portal opening up. And Aizawa sees this and he looks and he sees villains pouring in by the hundreds. An insane amount of villains. And he says, 13, protect the kids. I'm going to deal with the villains. Sorry about that. I had to clear my throat. And 13 says, okay. And a man with hands everywhere steps out of the portal. Behind him was a weird butler-looking dark purple cloud man. And he says, Karagiri, where's All Might? I thought you said All Might was here. And Karagiri responds, I don't know, young Master Shigaraki. He was meant to be here. And Shigaraki's like, let's just split up the students like we had planned. And they start splitting up the heroes and students and everything. Sue, Deku, and Midoriya all get landed into the same location. And Deku currently, just to give you a quick power scaling, I know I'm interrupting to give power scaling. Deku is about 20% of One For All currently. Yeah. Because he constantly increases, like, power every day. So he's about 20% of One For All. Not to mention he has his shadow soldiers and stuff. So, the event ensues, and there are tons of water villains, and Deku comes up with a plan. He knows that he left one of his shadows into every single student's shadow. He split up his shadows across every single student's. So, and Icarus is in his shadow. So, he holds on to Froppy and Mineta and teleports back to the center area where 13 of them are, because he had snaked a shadow into there. After teleporting there, he lets go of Froppy and Mineta and instantaneously prepares for combat by summoning Icarus. And Icarus is about, I want to say he's about 22% of All Might. So yeah, he's a little bit stronger than Deku's skill. Gotta remember, Deku got really lucky when fighting Icarus. Afterwards, they start battling. There was already villains there, and 13 was gonna ask how they got back here, but she realized she didn't have time because she has to deal with Kategori. She tried to use her attack against Kategori, but Kategori turns it around back on her thanks to a portal he had opened up, where she sucks out the whole entire back half of her. Now it's just Deku, Froppy, and Sue, Ida, and I'm pretty sure Kirishima and someone else was also there. Deku tells Ida to run and go get the heroes, which Ida obliges. Kategori tried to stop Ida, but Deku wasn't having any of that, and Icarus straight up bodies and slices Kategori, sending him flying backwards. He hit him with the side part of his sword. He didn't hit him with the actual sharp blade edge, because that would have murdered Kategori. And I can't have him die, or I lose the whole entire second half of the story, and also Deku would have to become a villain or a vigilante at most. I could probably done this better if I made Deku a vigilante. Gonna yoink that in my pocket for later. So, Kategori gets sent flying backwards. And Shigaraki notices this, and he's like, bring out the Nomu. And the Nomu starts coming out, and Deku can instantaneously see that the Nomu was dead. He is a Shadow Monarch, and he basically rules over the dead currently. So he can instantaneously see that the Nomu was dead. And he can see that he can use Shadow Extraction on the Nomu. Because Nomus are resurrected humans. I'm pretty sure. Resurrected humans. They were dead and got resurrected. Because I know spoilers, by the way. Kategori is one of Mr. Aizawa's old friends who were turned into a Nomu. He was like one of the first high-end Nomus. Deku instantaneously sees that the Nomu is dead. And he tells Froppy, and he's like, Froppy, Mineta, and Kirishima, that creature they just brought in is dead. And they're all, like, taken aback by this. And they ask Deku, how does he know? And Deku's like, I can use Shadow Extraction on it, which would allow me to extract the Nomu's shadow. All I have to do is get closer to it, and I can probably extract it. And they're both trying to think for a second. And out of nowhere, a white hand starts going towards Deku, which he dodges, thankfully, and kicks Shigaraki away. And he's like, you ungrateful brat. I was going to let you go out easily, but now I'm going to make sure you burn in pain for everything you do. And Deku's just not having any of it as he reaches into his inventory and grabs out the Thane of Fulgula, which, if you don't remember what that is, that's a lightning dagger that Deku got after completing a dungeon. And he chucks it straight at Shigaraki using Dominator's Touch to make sure he doesn't actually kill Shigaraki, and takes light cuts at him until Shigaraki gets paralyzed and falls on the floor, unable to move. And Deku just runs ahead, quickly trying to get to the Nomu as quickly as he can, not to fight the Nomu, but to Shadow Extract and make basically a copy of the Nomu. Which, after running there, Deku quickly makes a copy of the Nomu using Shadow Extraction to add the Nomu to his army. When he extracts the Nomu's shadow, he names the shadow Nomu Noma. So yeah, Deku's Nomu is called Noma. And he tells Noma to fight Nomu, which is just beating the living poop out of Aizawa currently. After the Nomu leaves Aizawa alone, Deku quickly turns Aizawa over onto his mouth and pulls a full restore out of his inventory and makes Aizawa drink it, which heals Aizawa completely and regaining his health and stamina. Aizawa takes a deep breath and goes, "Izuku, what's going on? I could swear everything was just broken. How am I still at the USJ?" And Deku says, "I used a full restore on you. And the Nomu, that creature they brought in that took you out, it's dead. It wasn't alive. I could extract its shadow," which I had done. And he sees a shadow form of Nomu fighting another Nomu of the same type and look. Out of nowhere, All Might comes through because Ida had just made it back in time, telling them that the USJ was under attack by villains. All Might had made it through and saw that 2 black creatures were fighting in the center while there were still tons of villains surrounding Eraserhead and Deku. All Might quickly blitzes over to the strong Nomu as soon as seeing it, and Deku yells, "The shadow, the black and blue one, is your ally. Just fight the black and yellow one." Which is basically how Deku's explained the differences. Because Deku's Nomu, imagine Nomu, but being like a black cloud with blue highlights for eyes, and his beak is blue. As well as any scars on his body being blue. Yep. That's Deku's Nomu, which is known as Noma. And Deku says, "Noma, assist All Might in taking out the Nomu." And Noma just squawks at Deku, basically, telling him, "Yes, sir, I'll do it." And Deku calls up Icarus, and he's like, "Icarus, help assist me, help Mr. Aizawa take out everyone here." And Deku, using Dominator's touch, quickly pulls back the knife from Shigaraki, who's still laying on the floor, paralyzed. And he takes it, and Aizawa says, "Deku, you can't kill them." And Deku's like, "Sir, I'm not. This will paralyze them if it cuts them. Or it has a 10% chance to, at least." As he chucks the dagger and using Dominator's touch, cuts all the villains at least once going around, taking out 10 of them, leaving 90 remaining. And then Deku does another full sweep, taking out another 10, while Aizawa's taking out villains one by one. And so is... So is Icarus. While All Might and Noma are both fighting the Nomu. All Might and Noma charge up one final giant smash and punch the Nomu, sending it flying out of the USJ to an unforeseen location because we have no clue where the Nomu went afterwards. And All Might thanked Noma, which Noma just looked at All Might for with lifeless eyes. Which All Might thinks, "I'm going to talk to Deku after this." Afterwards, he helps them clear up the rest of the villains. Shigaraki still being paralyzed, and Katagiri, who finally just woke up, teleports Shigaraki and him out of there. As Katagiri talks to Shigaraki, saying, "We might as well tell Master All for one about this boy's quirk. I think it could be very useful in our line of work." And he's talking about the Nomus. And Shigaraki says, "I agree." While we just see a man in black, orange, sitting there just smiling. already knowing that he doesn't need any information because he was already watching the battle from afar. After the USJ attack and everyone's calmed down, Deku heals 13 with a full restore, healing 13 all the way back up. And I guess her costume is her body, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to just state that her costume got healed. And then All Might pulls Deku aside, and so does Aizawa, while 13 is handling all the kids, because 13 has no clue what happened between Noma and everything. And Aizawa's like, so you mean that fiend that All Might and, what did you call it, Noma fought? What was its name? And Deku stated, they called it a Nomu. And they're like, And Aizawa asks, and you said that fiend was dead, correct? And Deku shakes his head up and down. And All Might's kind of confused by this. He's hanging out over there by Midoriya and them, but he understands that there's a situation here. And All Might asks, how do you know it was dead? And Deku remembers, since All Might doesn't know about Deku's powers, Deku goes into explanation stating that his classification is Shadow Monarch, and he's basically the advanced form of a necromancer, which is someone who can resurrect the dead, as well as his base ability is soul leveling, which will increase his strength and speed and intelligence as the days go on. And explains about the keys and the item shop and all of that system and everything, and all the gates and the portals. Explained that the creatures that he does have are not humans that he killed. They are beings from another universe with a shadow-like aura about them. And All Might is just amazed by Deku's power after hearing this, hearing that his power is not a quirk, it's something totally different. And so he's like, so that fiend's not alive. And Deku's like, no, it's some sort of dead fiend, but it's moving. Maybe they have a quirk that allows them to do that. And All Might's like, okay, can you summon Noma? And Deku summons Noma, and All Might just sees a person that looks like exactly like the Nomu, as the people called it, that he was just fighting, except it's blue and stuff. And he holds out his hand for Noma to shake, but Noma doesn't shake the hand because Noma's not intelligent enough to know how to shake hands. He knows how to fight, and that's it. And All Might's like, okay, I guess he's not very polite. And Deku says, well, Noma technically only has the intelligence of the Nomu. So I guess we can assume that the Nomu was not very smart based off of what we see from Noma. And All Might shakes his head in agreement, and so does Aizawa. Afterwards, they all head back to class, and Aizawa says, well, even though we just had an attack happen, we gotta prove that we will stand tall and keep fighting. The USJ attack will not affect the UA Sports Festival coming up, and everyone's excited and everything. And he explains that they have 2 weeks to train, and Deku thinks 2 weeks, that's enough time for me to start clearing out some dungeons, so I can get more people to add to my army. Afterwards, the class lets out, and that's where we're going to leave it off for today. So a quick explanation of why I didn't upload yesterday or Friday, which I was planning on uploading Friday and yesterday. Yesterday I had multiple recording issues with me being interrupted by other personnel, as well as other issues, and by the end of it I didn't feel like uploading. So I am saying sorry for that. And Friday, the main reason why is because Friday was a very, very bad day for me. Multiple things that are family-related issues had happened. And also I was worried because my grandmother went to the hospital because of a heart attack. So that's what happened Friday, and I do apologize for not uploading on that day. Thank you for watching this, and if you liked it, please hit the like button, helps out a ton. Comment as well. Tell me what you want to see me do next, or anything else you want me to see me do on this channel, or if you want me to continue another what if. Or if you just want to see this part come out, the next part to this one come out afterwards. And if you really enjoyed it and you like to see more what ifs like that, hit the subscribe button. I really want to get that subscriber count up to 100. I know it's big dream seeing how we're at 37, or is it 35? It's 35 or 37. But I think we can get there if we all join forces and all hit the subscribe button. Until next time, goodbye.